I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barber shop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah. It's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
John, every time I hear that, it just makes me want to go back to bed. What do you think? No?
Oh, no, it makes me want to get up and fight and, salute and wave the American flag, Brad.
Splash on some Old Spice and go out and hit the road, right?
I'm more of an Aqua Velva guy.
Aqua Velva guy. That is John Combest. He is the infamous, or the famous, whichever way you look at it, guy who every day for 22 plus years puts together a list of what's going on in the state politically and newsworthy and stuff like that. If it has anything to do with government, all that kind of stuff. Personalities involved, Mary Elizabeth Coleman, that kind of stuff. We heard from her at the top of the show. And we start the show off every morning by John giving us his top three. We have a guy come into the studio. And what's your name again?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what do you do again?
We're on our way to the number one.
So we start off with...
In third place. We're on our way to the number one.
Hold on a minute. I screwed up. My fat finger hit two buttons.
In third place.
There you go.
Follow up to a story that we talked about on Wednesday, Brad. You audaciously, on Wednesday, picked up your phone and called Mark McCloskey, and he gave an update on candidate vetting. Remember that conversation, Brad?
And I won a bet because you said I was going to get voicemail, and he answered the phone. He even said, "Hi, Brad."
I even stuffed my face with avocado toast, anticipating that you would be sent right to voicemail.
Nope.
However, there was a ruling in that case yesterday, Brad, and your friend, Mark McCloskey, and his side were victorious in that ruling. Can you believe that, Brad? Do you want me to kind of summarize what happened there? Or do you want to give a recap of that?
No, exactly. What you mean summarizes what the whole deal was?
Yeah, with the fight and the conversation, because you pointed out to Mark that you don't think it's a very good idea.
I do, because of the fact that he could. I mean, let's go back to him. I should have said this to him, and it could have been an insult. He could have been mad at. The bottom line of this whole situation is what's happened already in Franklin County. It's already in effect in Franklin County, correct?
Yeah, Franklin County was one of the first counties to institute a vetting process.
Essentially, if you, as Joe Citizen, want to run for office, and if you're a Republican or Democrat, you have to get essentially anointed by the committee in that county, whatever it is, like the Republican committee of, I don't know what's called in Franklin County. But essentially, you have to get the approval of them, and they have the final say of who goes on the ballot, correct?
That's correct, yeah. And a judge found in favor of Mark McCloskey and Mark McCloskey's team yesterday, Brad. So essentially what this was, and this case was in Vernon County, a bunch of candidates, including the incumbents, Brad, including like the county treasurer and some other folks, were not vetted. And in fact, a lot of them didn't submit their paperwork to the County Central Republican Committee. And the County Central Committee, the Republicans' argument there was that, hey, you got to give your paperwork and your filing fee to us, and then we give it to the county. And without our approval, you don't get to run as a Republican. And the candidates themselves disagreed. Some of these candidates disagreed. And the judge ruled in favor of the Republican Central Committee. So exactly what you said, Brad. Going forward now, this sets the precedent of counties can essentially veto which candidates they don't want to appear on the primary ballot.
But can they do that for statewide candidates? I mean, like, could we get in this crazy situation?
I don't think so, Brad. And I think, hey, this is a question we don't need to call them now, but I think this is a question we could ask legal experts, maybe like a Stephanie Bell, or maybe like a Well, I prefer to talk to Stephanie about it rather than other people. But I don't think it would be the same because you don't have county committees. I don't think so, Brad. I don't think it would apply, at least in the news coverage I've read. Now, my take on this, Brad, is just that for the candidates that have been vetted by a lot of these central committees, my bias is I like a lot of the candidates. So when I see candidates I like post something on social media that says, look, I've been vetted by this group or that group, I happen to like it right now. But the reason I don't like it long term is, Brad, just what you've brought this up before. Right now, people who are ideologically aligned with, say, me, have control of these central committees. But I really dislike the idea that what if you had a bunch of quote unquote rhinos take over a Republican Central Committee and just decide that a bunch of right wingers like me don't reflect the party platform. And you talk a lot, Brad, about the law of unintended consequences. Other than the phrase Tracy Ellis, you say unintended consequences more than anything else on the show. And I think it could have some unintended consequences for really good right-wing candidates in Missouri.
Well, John, I've always found it fascinating and find the law of unintended consequences fascinating on many levels, but especially in politics, because you see things that things, that in other words, like even if it's like in governance, there's things like that, laws and things like that. There's all sorts, like the classic example of it was the airbag law when, the government said, okay, we're going to make all the car manufacturers put these airbags in. It's going to save lives. Well, unfortunately, it killed a bunch of young kids, a bunch of infants, because of the fact that nobody thought about the fact that if you put an infant, especially in a rear-facing car seat, in the front seat, passenger seat, and if the airbag went off, it's going to propel that car seat backwards, which in turn is going to, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, and I hate to say this, snap the neck of the infant. And there were dozens, maybe even more than that, maybe hundreds of situations where, once again, the intent was for the airbag law to save lives, and in this case, it has saved lives. You go through the history, you see these accidents all the time, and there are people that never would have survived if it wasn't for airbags. And now you've got air curtains, and they're coming out of the floor and underneath the dashboard, and all sorts of different things. I don't know. Maybe we should call Mark McCluskey again, huh?
I think once a week is enough, though.
You don't like that? Okay, let's move on.
Up a notch to number 2.
A surprising development yesterday, and the person who's surprised is me, in that the Missouri Senate passed a budget yesterday, Brad. We had a little bit of, I guess you could call it budget anxiety among people, because the constitutional deadline to pass the Missouri budget is today at 6 p.m. And the Senate has been a roadblock on many issues over the years, and the Senate actually moved the budget out, which means that today by 6 p.m., the Missouri House must pass the budget, and by all accounts, the Missouri House will pass the budget. It shouldn't be an issue today. So kind of a surprise in that regard, Brad. And, there was a lot of consternation, concern, depending on what side you're on, about the budget and whether or not the Missouri Freedom Caucus would filibuster and have to be put in their quote-unquote place by the majority of the majority. But the budget went through, Brad. So I think it's kind of surprising that it happened on a Thursday. I would expect it to happen maybe on a Friday and put the House in a bad place. So for folks who were hoping for a positive budget discussion, this is a positive development.
Oh, and just, I don't know, is this going to be, if I ask you a question, it's your number one, will you defer? Because it won't
be. You absolutely don't know what the number one story is.
Okay, so where does the IP thing stand? And we're not talking about internet protocol. We're not talking about intellectual property. We're talking about
the IP will be discussed, is on the Senate docket for Monday. So the Senate is done until Monday, and they'll come back on Monday and try to work it through.
So they're not there today?
No.
What's the deal with that? Are they trying to be a school teacher?
I'm going to tell you why, Brad. Because they didn't get a chance to celebrate Truman Day. So they're making up for it. Hey, you know what friends of mine told me?
What's that?
That work for an unnamed German company. Everybody was off yesterday in Germany because it was Father's Day all across Europe. I guess at least Germany celebrates Father's Day during the week. And apparently, according to folks in Germany, the rationale is men on Father's Day deserve to get a day off from work.
Really?
So all my friends at an unnamed German company were ecstatic yesterday because when folks in Germany are off, email traffic's going to be down. People aren't going to be nagging you for this document and that crisis and whatever. So, it's good to have a holiday in the middle of the week, Brad.
You know what I say the downfall of civilization is going to be?
Let's see. If we would ever switch a Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo, and Billie Eilish station over to the news talk that people want in the Westplex. I think that would be a disaster. Why can't we hear Olivia Rodrigo's song 24 times, once an hour, all week? Why do we have to hear Brad and John 7 to 8 in the morning on 107.1 Westplex? Why? What, Brad? What's going to be the downfall?
Downfall of civilization is going to be too many holidays, and we're heading that way right now. We keep gaining holidays, and it's to the point where I heard this thing the other day. I can't remember what station I was listening to. They had this guy who was this expert, and they bring him on, and you know what he was expert at?
What's that?
Telling you how to maximize your vacation days.
Ooh. I like that, Brad.
Well, but here's what he says. No, he's going through the calendar this year. Now, if you take 2 days off, he's saying this. He's saying if you Christmas this year is on a Wednesday, so if you take 2 days off before Christmas and 2 days off after Christmas, you'll have 9 days off. And I'm going we need him to figure this out for us. You can't You can't look at the damn calendar and say, okay, for example, last year, the 4th of July was on a Tuesday. So that means if you took Monday off, you got 4 days in a row. Duh. Thank you, Mr. Knowledge, for telling us that. We wouldn't have been able to figure that out without you. You know what I mean?
But I think that for most people, Brad, they hate their jobs so much. And they hate getting in the car. They hate sitting down at a computer. They hate whatever they're doing so much that just saying the word vacation and planning vacation, people, if they see that headline on a public radio station or on another news site, they're going to click on it because it relieves them from the dreariness and the dread of their day-to-day life.
I know you don't probably listen to our station during the day, which bothers me quite a bit, but Armstrong and Getty have some very interesting conversations, and I know you probably haven't heard this before. Have you heard of this new thing that people are circulating called the passion penalty?
No. Oh, is it I'm guessing by context clues, if you do something you actually enjoy, you're going to make less money?
That's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. And they talked about the fact, well, here, let's pick that up in the second segment, because it is sort of interesting because you see the people who are always beating the drum for more money and more benefits, I think we talked about it earlier this week, the teachers in Chicago, who want more money, they want this, because quite honestly, they hate their jobs. They don't like their jobs. And so therefore, because of the fact that they want to be compensated more for the fact that they don't like their jobs. So anyway, we'll talk about that next break. Okay, last but not least,
the number one.
While we're talking about calendars, Brad, and later on we can figure out a time block that I can remove fun things from my life to listen to Eric Erickson. On Sunday, for Mother's Day, what people should do, according to St. Louis Public Radio and St. Louis on the Air, is head down to Maplewood. Do you know what's being played in Maplewood on Sunday, Brad?
It's the Mark Langston put the tail on the donkey campaign or something like that.
Oh yeah, it is actually. And in addition to that, it is a show called Immigrant Song. Now, Immigrant Song is about the discrimination against, people who are not white and people who come to the United States. And what does this have to do with politics? Well, according to the St. Louis on the Air interview, a woman was walking through the airport, Kennedy National Airport, after Donald Trump's election. And she thought of the pain that immigrants were going through. And she heard a bunch of immigrants, according to this story, a guy started singing, "This land is your land." And according to this woman, the whole airport started chiming in at the same time. And she got so moved by that, because the original guy, I guess, was an immigrant, that she decided to come back in St. Louis, and she decided to put together a nonprofit that would hold concerts. So what's really exciting is one of the women who takes part in this is she's something called a holistic pediatrician. And I think her conversation is really the centerpiece of this because she says she's treated differently because of, quote, the fact that she looks different, sounds different, and smells different, Brad. So apparently Native Americans, apparently natural-born Americans smell this woman, and she smells different, and then she can sense that they treat her differently. They also have some really good input from a guy that describes himself as gay and talks about how the fact that his direct quote is he's the first gay person in his family that he knows of, but he has a foundation of love and happiness. And so you get the immigrant thing, you get the anti-Trump sentiment, and then you also get a little bit of gay spice added in. So it's in Maplewood. It's at 2 p.m. If anybody wants to go 2 p.m., it's at a place called the Focal Point. Now, as everybody knows, Maplewood has a Metrolink station. So you don't even have to drive down there. You could ride the Soul Train, maybe get off at the Galleria, go steal some stuff, hide it somewhere, then take the Soul Train to Maplewood, get off and go to the Focal Point and hear a really uplifting Mother's Day concert, Brad.
I don't think the Metrolink station is near there, to tell you the truth. I've been on the Metrolink many times.
Well, even if it's a ways, couldn't you just steal a car and then drive a little bit closer to the venue?
John.
Somebody on there will be a Kia boy. Surely if you're on the Metrolink at any given point, you can meet a Kia boy, and then they could just steal a car with you.
I referenced the name Mark Langston. You know who that is?
Yeah, Mark Langston was a former host of WIL FM 92.
Exactly. He was a radio guy, okay? And then he got out of the radio business, and he got into politics, and he ran for mayor and was the mayor of Maplewood, I think, for a couple terms. And then he got out of that and was selling real estate. I don't know if he's still doing it anymore. Can I tell you my Mark Langston story, which is like this is like sort of weird radio nerd kind of crap? So,
yeah, of course.
Okay. Years ago, when I was first getting in the radio business, I was working the night shift. And occasionally we had an air monitor in the air studio where we could literally tune the air monitor down to another station and listen to what's going on other radio. So I was working, it's probably like, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was just scanning the band, just going down. And I went down to, at the time, it was KADI 96.3. It was like a light version of KSHE. It wasn't like as heavy duty rock and roll as KSHE, but it was, I don't know what the format you'd call it today, but it wasn't quite as, rock as KSHE was. So when I tuned down the dial, when I got to KADI, it was like a record in the end groove. Ka-clunk, ka-clunk, ka-clunk. You know what I'm talking about?
I know
For those of you who still know what a record was, when you put it on the turntable, especially if you had an album, when it went to the very end, there was what they called the end groove, and the record would just spin around, but the stylus would just stay in one spot, and where it went into the end groove, there was a little notch in the record, and it gave that little clunk. So go ka-clunk, ka-clunk, ka-clunk. So I tuned the monitor down about 20, 30 minutes later, and it was still there. About another 20, 30 minutes later, still there. So I thought to myself, you know what? I wonder if the guy over at KDI, I wonder if he had like some kind of a health emergency or somebody broke in and did something to him. Because at the time, we were in Clayton. This is the old KSOQ, 111 South Bemiston, now the St. Louis County Jail. And KADI was over on Forsyth, where now all the Centene places are. They knocked all that down, and that's all Centene right now. Okay, so I called the Clayton police, and I called the dispatcher, and I said, hey, I don't know if this is, I told her who I was. I was on the air KSOQ, 111 South Bemiston, and I don't know what's going on over at KDI. I knew the address and the whole bit. I said, you might want to send an officer by there to find out what's going on, because the guy on the air apparently is incapacitated or something, because the record's just going ka-clunk, ka-clunk, ka-clunk. Now, it was interesting. She's sitting there at the dispatching console, whatever, in Clayton, and she tunes her radio over there. And she goes, you're right. That's not right. I'll send an officer over. So the next day, I get a call, and, in like 30 minutes later, I tuned down to KDI, and there's music. I go, okay, whatever's going on was fine. The next day, I get a call at the radio station from Mark Langston. And Mark is saying, hey, Brad, you saved my donkey. I go, what are you talking about, Mark? I didn't know what he was talking about at the time. He says, I was the guy on the air last night, and I fell asleep on the floor in the studio, and all of a sudden, I heard this banging on the door at the end of the hallway, because the studio for KDI was at the end of the hallway, the entrance door was at the other end of the hallway, and the officers were banging their nightsticks and flashlights on the main entrance to the station, and he heard it, and he woke up, and he go, oh my God, I fell asleep. And he runs down the hall and lets the police in, and they're like, hey man, are you okay? Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I fell asleep. And they said, you need to thank that guy over at KSOQ, because he's the guy that called us and told us that there was something going on over here.
Mark just must have had, did he have a rough night the day before, or was it just the nature of the shift?
I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, and forever, every once in a while, I haven't seen him or heard from him in a long time. Matter of fact, the last time I saw him was he bought one of my old transmitters. After he got out of being on the air, he went into, I can't remember what he's doing. I think he might even be doing real estate, but he bought a station up in Illinois, north of us, I think like in Jacksonville or someplace like that. And he bought a station, and he had problems with his transmitter. And I had a very similar transmitter at the time, which I was not using because I'd bought a new transmitter. And I sold him my old transmitter. And he came by the transmitter site, and him and his engineer picked it up. And I think that's the last time I've even talked to him. It's been a long time. But it was funny for years after that. Every time I'd run into him, he'd go, hey man, there's the guy that saved my job, because he was afraid that the morning guy was going to come in, or the owner of the station, good old Richard Miller, would tune in the station and go, what's going on with my station? There's something going on. There's just an end record. There's an end groove. Oh, we can't have that. Can't have that. We got to play those ads. Got to make money. Got to make money. Got to put money in my pocket.
And he was at WIL for a long time, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then he went over to the Bull. And I think that's when he got out of the radio business. He was, and great guy. I mean, really nice guy, sharp guy. Because you deal with all these politicians, you don't get to the point. At least most of them, you don't get to the point where you can get elected to an office by being a schlub or something like that. You got to have motivation.
Right, yeah, for the most part, that's true. I think some people would take issue with that. Right. The whole thing is, as long as you're vetted by the Central Committee, you're okay, Brad. They haven't. One of the questions is, are you or are you not a schlub? And if you say yes, then you're immediately disqualified.
So I can't call Mark McCluskey. You won't let me call him?
Yeah, probably not. I think we've done enough of Mark lately. And remember, he's doing overhead presses now. He's setting the world record again for overhead presses.
We haven't had, up until we talked to him, was that Wednesday we talked to him? Yeah. I hadn't had him on the air. I don't know, maybe not even this year. It might have been last year the last time we had him on the air. No?
Yeah. He's people love to hear from him. I'm sure it's the most exciting thing. It's right after Series SOQ transmitter parts, Brad.
No. That's Square D. That's Square D QO load breakers. That's what I was.
Oh, I got that. Yeah, Boy, I'll tell you what, if anybody knows how to break off a load.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?